Hi, this is Chapter 11, Communication and Collaboration. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about a couple different things. Um, Issues that come up with interpersonal communication, the nature of communications within organizations, and how to build more collaborative work environments, which is very important for organizational behavior. Okay, so the nature of communication in organization. What is communication? Of course, it's sending and receiving messages and information with meaning. And this, I mean, we all know what communication is, but the book has to cover it. Okay, so we have a little diagram here, and the like I said, communication, the process of sending and receiving information with messages and meanings attached. The key elements in the communication process are illustrated in this figure on this slide, figure what we call 11-1. They include a source, which encodes an intended meaning into a message, and a receiver, which decodes the message into a perceived meaning. The receiver may or may not give feedback to the source. Although this process may appear to be elementary, it is not quite as simple as it looks. Noise is the term that we're going to use to describe any disturbance that disrupts the communication effectiveness and interferes with the transference of the message within the communication process. Um, for example, someone may be trying to communicate with you and you get a text message and you're looking at your phone or you're thinking about something else, you're just distracted. So we could see here how noise can easily interrupt these channels of communication. Okay, let's see. All right, so the information source, or what we call, I guess, the sender, is a person or group trying to communicate with someone else. The source seeks to communicate in part to change the attitudes, knowledge, or behavior of the receiver. A team leader, for example, may want to communicate with a division manager in order to explain why the team needs more time or resources to finish a particular project. Um, okay, so let's think. So let's see. You also have the noise, which we were talking about before, and that can be any disruption that's going to degrade or deteriorate the effectiveness of the message or the transference of the message within the communication process. It could also be a phone call where the cell signal is dropping and the background noise is distorting or disrupting the message being sent. Um, okay. So now any message that is sent, of course, has to be encoded and decoded. The process of translating the ideas or thoughts into a message consisting of either verbal, written, or even nonverbal signatures or symbols such as hand gestures and things in that such, or a combination of all three. So, and messages, as we know, can be transmitted through various communication channels. Here are some different communication channels. I mean, I think we've all one time or another communicated uh, with one of these methods. Online discussions are probably getting to be more popular, where written letters are a little bit less popular. And there's also an art to leaving a voicemail as a communication channel, where um, you have a limited amount of time to say what you need to say and get your message communicated effectively. Okay, so some people are better at using some channels than others, of course, and specific channels are better to handle certain communications and different types of messages. Now, one thing they don't have here would be texting, which is now becoming a very important communication channel where people text to each other a great deal, and I'm sure we all can relate to you must have some communications in texting, and I have some friends that will only text. I really don't ever talk to them on the phone. So that's become a very important communication channel, not just outside the workplace, but also in the workplace. People are texting each other during meetings, it becomes the cell phone on silence and then people texting each other back and forth during the meeting has also become a phenomena of communication as well. Because now in meetings we can communicate with each other without disrupting the meeting, other people knowing exactly. It adds a whole other layer of dynamic to the meeting. And the communication process is not complete even after a message is sent. So say any of these messages or a text message or voicemail, there has to be, the receiver who the message is directed, and they have to, hear it. In order for the meaning to be assigned to any received message, the contents must be interpreted through decoding. So this is when I say decoding, it's not like it's encoded, encrypted. It's more like, do they understand what you're trying to tell them? The process of translation it can be complicated by many factors, including the knowledge, the experience of the receiver, his or her relationship with the sender. A message may also be interpreted with the added influence of other points of view, such as offered by other friends, coworkers, organizational superiors. And this could be quite often what you might use in an email. A lot of times you may receive an email and not exactly understand what the sender's tone is. Are they joking? Are they mad? Are they being sincere? So then this is a case where a relationship with the person would definitely help, or seeking the advice of some coworkers who may know the person better can help to understand the true meaning of the message. Ultimately, decoding may result in the receiver interpreting a message in a way that is different from what originally was intended by the source, and that could be a huge problem. Okay, so feedback. Most receivers are well aware of the potential gap between the intended message and the source of and perceived meaning applied to it by the recipient. Now, perception, we did talk about this in the previous chapter. Learning often occurs because individuals misinterpret the meaning of the message or misinterpret the motives of the sender, or they may see in there something the sender did not intend. When there are gaps in messages, receivers often need to fill in the blanks, resulting in potential miscommunication in the workplace. So when someone sends an email or a text message or even says something without thinking it through thoroughly and without thinking about the clarity of what they're trying to say, this could be a problem. So one way to fill in these gaps and identify what is happening is feedback from the receiver. So the process through which the receiver communicates with the sender by returning another message. Feedback represents a two-way communication. So whenever there's feedback possible, it's a two-way communication. And sometimes just a simple "what" or "what did you mean" is sufficient. So going from the sender to the receiver and back and forth again, this flow is a two-way communication, and it's more accurate and effective. Although it may be more costly and time-consuming, depending on the mode of communication, because of the efficiency, one-way forms of communication, memos, letters, emails, reports, are frequently used in a work setting. So there are some things like a memo from the president comes to your desk, you can't really get feedback. Although I would say with an email, you could always hit reply and ask for feedback and give them feedback. Unless it's one of those emails that say you cannot reply to this email, which most spam emails do. All right. Okay. So let's look at some potential barriers to feedback in the workplace. Concerned that the feedback will be could fan the flames of emotions. So if feedback is something that could make the situation worse, that could be a barrier to giving any feedback back. A situation where someone's upset and they email you what they're mad at, and you want to wait for the person to cool off, or the feedback just wouldn't be appropriate at that time. I mean, there's situations where this can occur. if you don't know the person well, or if it's a hostile situation, a message that was intended to be polite and helpful can sometimes be perceived as, unpleasant and even hostile. Even the word thanks, when someone says, or please, please do this for me. Uh, it can sometimes even be misinterpreted on the way it's said or written. So even a simple word like that can sometimes be perceived incorrectly. In one area that we talked about earlier, the performance appraisal, this is where you really want to communicate what I feel is mostly praise and constructiveness. I think criticism has its place in the performance appraisal, but in the minimal stance, criticism should be delivered throughout the year to help the person get to where you want them to be, and that criticism should only be repeated in a performance appraisal if they didn't follow through on work on any of the criticisms offered during the year. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some nonverbal communication. Now, this, of course, is, we know about communication when it's spoken or written, but there's some nonverbal communication that takes place. And this could be, people can use their faces or their bodies or their eyes and other physical gestures to convey a message. People who are effective communicators recognize the importance of presence. So the act of speaking without words. And sometimes while you're speaking, you can have these nonverbal communications as well, where you may be saying something and shaking your hand or shaking your head. I mean, it's quite common that they're connected together. And it can be a powerful influence, these nonverbal cues and communications. And it's often, sometimes these nonverbal body language and things is the person saying it without even consciously thinking of it. So you could come up and look at somebody, and if their arms are crossed and they're sort of don't have a friendly appearance, and they're talking to you, you can get the sense that they're kind of upset or perturbed, or So this is a way of your body expressing itself, sometimes with your mind not even consciously doing it. So it's quite interesting to study this nonverbal communication. Okay, so nonverbal communication can take place throughout the physical arrangement of space and workspace design. Such as the various work layouts found here, and the study of the way we use space is important to communication. So in this figure here, 11.2, shows 3 different office arrangements and the messages that they may communicate to visitors. Check out this diagram against the furniture arrangements in your office, or that of the of your work environment. What are they saying to visitors by the choice of the furniture placement? So we can see in the first box that when the desk, you're behind the desk and the desk is in front of you in front of the door, that's pretty much the boss. I'm the boss. If you're seated directly across from the boss behind his desk, it says I'm the boss, but less talk. And then if you're seated next to each other, say on a couch or side by side at a table, then it's sort of saying, forget about me being the boss, let's talk. So it's the way that you communicate somebody in the position that you are in their office can have a lot of nonverbal communication. Let's talk about some interpersonal barriers that you may or may not come across. So here's a famous quote by Emerson. I can't hear what you say because who you are speaks so loudly. So interpersonal barriers can occur when individuals are not able to objectively listen to the sender due to such things as lack of trust, personal clashes, a bad reputation, stereotypes, prejudices. In such a case, receivers and senders may distort communication by eliminating and judging a message or failing to communicate effectively. Think of somebody that you have a problem with or rubs you the wrong way. Now think about how you communicate with this person? Do you listen effectively? Are you on guard with them? Do you shut them down right away? Do you share information? Do you keep your interactions short? Do you avoid the person? These are all going to be problems for communication. Um, Now, some problems can be selective listening or filtering. In selective listening, individuals block out information or only hear things that match preconceived notions they have. Someone who does not trust will assume that the other person is never telling the truth and may only hear things in communication that and assume they are not accurate. An employee who believes a coworker is incompetent may disregard important information that comes from the person just in the fact that they can possibly get anything right. So individuals may also filter or convey only part of the information. Um, you know, so critical details or little points of the information may be left out to tailor the communication to fit the way that the person wants you to perceive the event, circumstances, or person. And a lot of interpersonal barriers may also be caused due to ego problems. People have such big egos. How many times have you felt uncomfortable to talk to somebody that was higher up in your company, maybe your vice president or president, because their ego was so big that if you dared talk to them, they would make a face at you, or later complain to your manager that you bothered them, or how dare you talk to me? I'm the president of the company. They give off that sort of persona, and some people just feel that they're so big and powerful. There's no need for them to communicate with you. So that could be a real problem. And many people possess poor communication skills. So individuals with ego problems may twist what someone says to serve their own purposes. So that's the other thing. Your ego somebody may telling you may be telling you something very important, but you're not hearing it because your ego's not letting you hear it. It could be maybe you're in an intervention and someone's trying to tell you about a problem you have, but you're not listening or believing it because your ego is getting in the way. Support communication skills involve failing to be effective listening. It could be being distractive or rambling in meetings rather than presenting a clear message. Unable to phrase the message appropriately to the audience you're talking to. So there's a lot of problems you can see that comes with these interpersonal barriers within communication. Okay, physical distractions are another barrier to communication. Think of this more as you're trying to talk to somebody and their cell phone rings, or they get a text message, or a light is flashing on their phone or their alarm or their computer, and these are just distractions. So you can't really get your message across. Or maybe ever talk to somebody and they're multitasking at the same time. You're at their desk, you're talking to them, they're looking at their iPhone, they're typing in their computer, and they're trying to maintain a conversation with you at the same time. Besides this being rude, it's also a big distraction where you're not going to really hear exactly what you're saying, and it can be quite frustrating to the sender. Now, semantic barriers. Now these can involve just the wrong choice of words or mixed messages. It's really talking about the clarity of your written or spoken messages. And there's a popular principle that people call it KISS, keep it short and simple. I like to say keep it short, stupid, but that's not very nice. I guess that would be sending they may receive that communication in the wrong way. But the basic element here is to keep it short and simple, so that way your message and it's very good for when you email somebody. Try to keep it as brief and short, as simple as possible. I know I do that when I email. Some of you may have gotten an email from me where you ask me a question and my reply is simply yes or no to your question. And most of the times that's the most effective, efficient, and clear way to get my point across, rather than giving 3 or 4 paragraphs as to why in some cases. So there could be Sometimes slang can be involved here, or the word usage that you use may be ununderstood by the other party. Sometimes you could be when you're trying to describe something and then you just get lost in what you're saying, and it just gets too confusing for the other person to follow, or so these are all problems, definitely. Semantics. Okay, active listening. This is something that you probably wish your husband or maybe wife would do more of. Ever been talking to, say, you're driving with your significant other in the car and you're taking a drive and you're talking to them about your day, and then you stop for a second, you get to a point, you feel like they're not listening, and you say, did you hear what I said? And sometimes they may be able to have this magic tape recorder in their head where they could replay the last 30 or 40 words that you said to them, but they're really not listening. They're in some other world. So in communication, you have to make sure that the other side is actively listening to what you're trying to say, or the message won't be sent effectively. So developing good listening skills is probably one of the harder communication angles, especially in this world of constant distractions between all our electronic devices and our complicated lives and everything that we're thinking about and all the emotions that we have. It's very hard to focus and listen to what's being said. And you may have found this to be a problem when you're in the classroom listening to a lecture, or even listening to me on this lecture right now. That you may, especially since I'm not in front of you, you may easily get distracted by having this lecture play in the background while you're surfing the internet or working on your homework assignments or doing other things. So a lot of the information can be lost. So here's some guidelines for active listening that may help you. One, you want to listen for content. Try and hear exactly what's being said. Listen for feelings. Try to describe how the source feels about things or the subject. Respond to feelings. So let the source know feelings are being recognized and say, I see that you're sad, or I see you're upset. Note the cues. Be sensitive to both verbal and nonverbal expressions. So repeat back in your own words what you think you're hearing. And this is very effective for active listening. You hear what the person's saying, then you stop and say, is this what you mean? And repeat it back to them. And this is way you can avoid any confusion. Okay. Ethnocentrism. So a common problem in cross-cultural communication is this ethnocentrism, the tendency to believe one's culture and its values are superior to others. It's often accompanied by an unwillingness to try to understand alternate points of view or take the values they represent seriously. So this is a huge problem in our society, that we might believe that our own culture or religion or personal preferences are superior to others, or what others think or what others do. So that the cross-culture communication challenges, not just this is part of it. If you have you're basically sort of a bigot, or you have prejudices, and you feel that your culture, if anyone feels their culture is superior in all ways to all other cultures or peoples, or what your religion or what you think or what your family thinks, you have a closed mind if you let these ethnocentrisms affect you in a way that you can't listen to someone else's point of view. So you may have a point of view that's something controversial, whether it's abortion, gay marriage, or any these political issues come up. That's okay to have an opinion of what you feel is right, but it's not okay to shut out everybody else's ideas. And if you're opening a communication between you and these people, you need to be able to have an open mind and give them respect and listen to what they have to say. Now, cross-culture communications are going to have their own unique challenges, and the first one being definitely language. The differences in language. In some cases, if two people speak two different languages, they're left with only nonverbal communication. The use of different gestures. Some gestures in some cultures are quite don't really mean anything offensive, and the same exact gesture in a different culture can be very offensive. So these are problems that can make communication with people who are different than you difficult. And as long as you have an open mind, or you seek a tool or interpreter, or a way of bridging these cultural communication barriers, things should be okay. But it's very difficult. People of two languages, even if they're talking through an interpreter, because you lose the inflection, you lose a lot of the direct words that people are saying to each other. So it's something to be thought of and to be very considerate of when you're listening to someone who may be quite the opposite of you, to give them the respect and open-mindedness that they deserve. It doesn't mean you have to change how you feel or think, but you're letting yourself get the information that may be pertinent to your education in the subject. And you know what? Quite frankly, I've try to be very open-minded, and there's been many occasions where I've changed my opinions on things after listening to people talk, or the facts or the information. And that's what makes a well-balanced person. You don't want to be a closed-off individual. Parochialism. The ways of your culture are the only ways of doing something. So when people, another problem with this cross-cultural arises from parochialism, assuming that the ways of your culture are the only ways of doing things. This parochial, say for example, a traveling American businessman, to insist that all their business contacts speak English, that could be a little bit about what we're talking about here. To think that everyone has to dine with a spoon rather than a knife or a fork, or people, no one can eat with it's a way of inflicting your culture, try to inflict your cultures on others. And this is, not as common today, but can you think about, in days gone past where, other cultures, especially if they were going to, colonize another culture, or they would, definitely try to force their culture and their ways of doing things onto the people they're meeting with or communicating with, and has to be done their way and the particular way. There's no compromise, because they want everybody to be assimilated into their culture and their cultural habits. All right. Okay, so let's talk about low context cultures. So if you're a member of a low context culture, you are very explicit in using the spoken and written word. In these cultures, such as Australia and Canada and our country, the United States, the message is largely conveyed by words someone uses, and not particularly by the context in which they are spoken. In contrast, people from high context cultures often use words to convey a limited part of the message. The rest must be inferred or interpreted from context, which includes body language, physical settings, past relationships, all of which add meaning to what's being said. And this is common in many Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, are considered to be high context. Now, sort of, for example, think of it this way. You may have a low context culture when you talk to people that in a business environment that you meet for the first time, where you basically say what you mean and you write exactly what you mean. But you may have a more high context culture with your own immediate family, where a lot of what you're saying isn't just exactly what you're saying. It's the way you're saying it and who you're saying it to. And it's all this rich context of your family culture that gets involved in how you communicate. So you can kind of think about it in those terms. In some countries, the culture is a lot more reflected in their communication and their context than in other countries. Specifically, our country is typically a lot more low context. And it's an interesting way to know about that, because it's all about, not what is being said, it's about how it's being said. Okay, we also have different types of channels. We have formal channels established by, the chain of command. And, if you have a problem, you talk to your supervisor, but you don't talk to your supervisor's manager. And you definitely don't talk to your supervisor manager's vice president boss. So these are things that are definitely known in the workplace. So basically, the formal channels are going to be established by the company you work for, and it's a hierarchy of authority. So if you look at an organizational chart and who reports to who, and that's basically the formal channels. And you're supposed to follow this chain of command and not really skip over anybody. Now there are informal channels which they don't adhere to the organization's hierarchy of authority. They coexist with the formal channels, but frequently they diverge from them by skipping levels in the hierarchy and cutting across divisional lines. Informal channels help to open communications in organizations and ensure that the right people are in contact with one another. So, these informal channels can be created by friends. They can be created by other associations. They can be created by various different things where we allow for communication to occur that's not in such a formal channel. Okay, let's talk about the Grapevine. Like that song, I heard it from the Grapevine. If I was able to be a little bit more creative, I'd probably play it in the background here. But this Grapevine is another communication channel that could be a network of friends or acquaintances through which rumors and other unofficial information passes from one person to another. So grapevines have the advantage of being able to transmit information quickly and efficiently, but not always accurately. They're helpful. They help people get information otherwise they may not be privy to. So you can kind of, if you're worried about something happening in your company, may it be a layoff, maybe cancellation of raises, decreasing of benefits, change in company's location. A lot of this you could ask, try to go through the Grapevine, see what's going on, and sometimes just being part of the Grapevine, you feel like socially accepted. But the huge disadvantage of this type of communication is that a lot of times they can be wrong. People could spread rumors for their own personal reasons that are incorrect, or information can come out that could be harmful or damaging to the business, or even illegal as far as insider trading. So these grapevines, everybody, you shouldn't really engage in rumors or gossip, but sometimes when you're bored at work and someone has something to say, you just can't help but listen. We've all been there, right? Okay, channel richness. We're talking about the capacity of communication to convey a message. So the richest channels, of course, are talking face to face. The person's right in front of you, and you see them and smell their bad breath and see all their whole body gestures. The next would be, I guess, a video conference or a telephone call when you can hear and see them, or at least just hear them, followed by instant messaging or email and written memos and letters. So kind of goes down the chain. And basically what you're looking here from this channel richness is any avenue where you can get more communication details from somebody through all the different forms of communication, the richer the channel. The thinnest channels may be something like a bulletin board or a mass email. So this is a factor you should know about. Okay. Oh, actually, here's a good chart for seeing the different low richness and high richness types of events, and you can see that face-to-face meetings or video conferences are the highest, and then kind of what I said, going back to the lower richness. Pretty common sense here. Okay, so let's look. Here's another figure, 11.4. The flow in and around information around the organization. Within organizations, information flows from both the formal and informal channels that we were just talking about, and as well as the upward, diagonal, sidewards, laterally. And there's also downward communication. So if you look in the chart and you see the little arrow pointing down, and it follows a chain of command from top to bottom. One of the major functions is to achieve influence through the information. Now, the lower level person um, needs to know what those higher levels are doing, and to be regularly reminded of key policy strategies and objectives, or changes in product or developments um, of technical nature. And special importance are feedback and information on performance skills. So this downward communication is really, trying to make sure the company functions properly and that the information that is important gets disseminated to all employees through this channel. So sharing such information helps minimize the spread of rumors and inaccuracies regarding high-level intentions. It also helps to create a sense of security and involvement among receivers who believe they know the whole story. Unfortunately, a lack of adequate downward communication is often cited in most management of most companies. Now we also have the upward communication, and we see that with an hour pointing upward on the chart on the right side here. Um, you know, Upward communication keeps the higher levels informed about what the people, the lower level peons are doing. What their problems are, what suggestions they have for improvement, how they feel about the organization, their job satisfaction. The upward communication is always a problem in most organizations due to low-level employees filtering what they say, what they truly fear, being afraid of the higher up getting mad at them or not liking what they say, and leaving a lot of people at the higher end of the organization in the dark about what's really happening. And this is, I think you could think about your work circumstances where this may have happened, where, if you're a manager or a supervisor and you're just not getting the message that people are unhappy, or that people, what they're really feeling, or how, their attitudes towards work, or even their information or feedback on new products or new sales strategies, what you're listening to your workers can be a very huge source of successful information for the higher ups. Now we also have this lateral communication, as we see down here with the double arrow here. And lateral communication is, hoping to produce somewhat of a collaborative environment for workers, to work together in, communication is key at the lateral level for things like problems and feedback and advice to be given. In today's organization, with all the tools we have for communication, things need to be timely. Feedback and information need to come at the right moment. If you want to serve your customers better, you have to get information about what they're feeling at the time of purchase, or right after purchase, or before they decide to purchase. And prevent bigger problems with coworkers, you need to get there being able to communicate. Say for example, it's a restaurant, some of the food has been spoiled. How is this going to be communicated? Because it has to be communicated quickly, so none of this goes into any customers' mouths. So inside the organization, people must be willing to be able to communicate across departmental or functional barriers. That's why those cross-functional task force we talked about in earlier chapters are really key to some of this. And because we need people to listen to one and each other, and these internal, people, this lateral communication is the basis for core competitive advantages among many companies. For keeping their products and their designs effective and useful, you need as much clear communication and engagement from the different people involved as possible. So organizations that work to collaboratively design and emphasize this lateral communication in form of cross-functional teams and task forces and committees are going to have a much easier time at utilizing this information successfully. Now, today's information technology, of course, allows organizations to distribute information instantaneously, make more information available faster and than ever before, and immediate access to this information, especially through these alerts and emails and text messages. And they just have to make sure they try to incorporate proper sharing among individuals and participation in this information, and integrate these functions and systems and make sure that the information it links together properly among all these different information pathways. So, of course, like we talked about before, in relation to the shift to this slide, organizational communication, information flows through formal and informal structures and downward, upward, and laterally with inside a corporation. So we know that. And I already talked about these upward, downward, and lateral communications during on the slide with the graphic. And basically, this is what I was just talking about. Advances to the technology make just think about technology today with face-to-face communications, video conferencing, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, phone calls, text messages, emails, instant messages. We just have so much more ability technically to communicate these days. The key to any organization is to properly encourage the correct way, the correct methods to communicate, and the participation and sharing the information in a positive and beneficial way to the organization or work environment. Now, some disadvantages to this, of course, some technology can be cold and impersonal. No one likes to break up through a text message. A text message. Hey, guess what? Not interested in going out with you anymore. Have a nice life. Not really a nice text message to get. Sometimes these electronic communications, you lose the nonverbal part of the communication. You lose some of the. It's very difficult to be sarcastic or funny in some of these methods of communication. They can create difficulties emotionally and interpretively. So, and there's also a big problem with information overload. Just so much information coming at you through, newspapers, emails, phone calls, computers. It's like you can't get away from it. It's overwhelming at sometimes. Okay, let's talk about status differences. So another key element of organizational communication associated with the hierarchy of people, organizing, their differences. You can have the status difference, which creates potential communication barriers between persons of higher and lower ranks. So we've all been there, I'm sure. On one hand, given the authority of their position, managers may be inclined to do a lot of telling but not much listening. A huge problem for most managers, and we've all been in a situation where the manager's just not listening to what we really need to say to them, but they just want to run around and bark orders at everybody. Communication is frequently based on flowing upward in an organization is difficult. So when we try to, if we're not going to allow subordinates, create environments where they're not going to filter their information or censor what they're trying to tell us, the problem can be where bosses are only hearing what employees think they want to hear. And that can be a real problem for organizations. And sometimes the reason for it, you don't want to be the bearer of bad news. You fear of retribution, unwillingness to identify any mistakes you may have made. These are all things that going to result in the higher level decision maker not ending up with enough information and maybe making the wrong actions based on this information. You can also have the mum effect, the tendency to keep mum or quiet, a desire to be polite or reluctant to, be the bearer of bad news. And, say, for example, it could be something as simple as the boss comes in and he has cream cheese on his tie or his face, and everybody's just too embarrassed to say anything to him because they don't want to put him in a compromised position, so they just ignore it. Okay, so collaborative. We're talking about collaborative environments again. And this is, to be a very truly collaborative environment, we need to have a reduction in the boundaries where information can flow back and forth. People need to be much more open and transparent with each other and supportive in how they talk to each other. And it's not always easy. but the more collaborative an environment can be made, the more beneficial communication can be done. Um, Before we get to interactional transparency, let's just talk about, I guess in today's world, um, we have to also acknowledge here that, the usefulness of social networking and Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, which we're using for our own, communication right now on this lecture, and these video technologies that can create a more collaborative environment. Um, but they can be overused at times, and they can be these collaborative technologies can sometimes be clunky or ineffective. I know that they do have online collaborative tools. SB Connect is one thing we use for school, and I find it to be very clunky and difficult to have a class through that. Where even when I do the office hour sessions, it becomes difficult where not everybody can hear, not everybody can be heard. There's some people's microphones don't work, or there's a feedback, or the technical difficulties in having a large group meet together on an online environment, is difficult. And you could see that if you ever had an online class where that's attempted, the technology just quite isn't there. It's more of a distraction than a help. And a lot of times it drags out the communication process to ineffective levels. So that's why I generally prefer to have these YouTube solution that we use for this class, where I record the lectures on YouTube and then you watch them, because everybody can work YouTube and there's no software to download or work with. And although it has the limitation of being a one-way communication, me to you, but it's certainly a lot more effective and efficient than some of the other solutions that I've looked into for these online courses. All right. So let's look at interreactional transparency. So transparency is a big word, especially in finance, where where things need to be more open and more honest. So this is a big thing in today's ethics and today's organizational behavior, and abilities for everybody to be open and accountable, honest with each other. I mean, we've had big economic problems in the past, and Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed to help make things more transparent, make people more accountable for financial records. So this transparent communication is really key. Some organizations are purposely taking down walls, putting up glass walls, trying to have a real transparent work environment, even to the point where people's salaries are all transparent and online, so that way you could look up and see what other coworkers are making. And so you may think that, don't believe the brainwashing of former high-level executives that knowing each other's salary is bad. It's actually a good thing, because if you know what everybody else is making, and there's an efficient inequity, you can address it and have that. So if you're working on a team, you all have the same title and same years of experience in the same position, but you're making half as much as everybody else, that's some very valuable information for you to know, and very easy to use that information to get a raise. That's the real reason they don't want to open up payrolls, is because they don't want you to know that you're being underpaid, because that may lead to you asking for more money, and rightfully so. So, this transparency needs to work both ways, not just with the lower level employees, but with the higher level employees, where things really need to be open and honest. And that's the only true way to have the best communication and the most effective communication. So in the vein of being, transparent with your communications, you need to share relevant information, not hide it or keep it to yourself. Being forthcoming with your, regarding motives and reasons behind your decisions, of what's truly happening. How many times has a company made a decision that they portray it as one way, but it's really something else? We find this with the government, with a lot of individuals, that their true motives aren't always on the surface, aren't always transparent. And proactively seeking and giving feedback. A lot of people who, they don't want feedback. Here's what I'm saying. listen to it. I don't want to hear you talk back to me about it. So these are all things problem with transparency. The organizations are trying to address, and we're trying to, we want a more open environment. We want a more open government. We want to really know what truly is happening, because then people can't hide behind these lies and these cover-ups and these, hidden information to take advantage of people is basically what they do with it. That hidden payroll is to take advantage of workers who are underpaid and to keep, and unfortunately in a lot of companies, women are the victim of being underpaid in a lot of positions, and this closed payroll is a part of what keeps it that way. Just as an example. Okay, so some supportive communication principles. Now, these tools can be helpful to overcome problems. So, you people can have these issues where they're fearful or uncomfortable or worried that trying to talk to somebody about a problem will only make it worse. And these definitely come from lack of understanding how to approach difficult conversations. So there are, supportive communication principles can help people overcome this. And the principle is going to focus on solving the problem with the intent of addressing communication breakdowns and changing behaviors that cause these problems. So the emphasis is on supportive, trying people to create an environment where you're not going to be judged, people aren't going to be defensive, where you get an opportunity to talk and say what you have to say without being lashed back at, without having to deal with people being defensive about it, or you get just a freer environment, a more unconditional environment to be able to talk and express your feelings without fear of retaliation, without fear of resentments. People have huge problems where people can get very defensive and they feel they're being attacked or they need to protect themselves, and it's a real hurdle to blocking communication. If you communicate with someone and they begin to get angry and become aggressive, that person is feeling defensive. So, when someone's self-worth or their validity is being questioned, now that could hamper the communication as well. So these are definite problems that you could see, it's going to happen. Now, how to reduce these issues? You want to focus on the problem, number one, not the person. Don't attack the person personally. So you also want to be, specific and descriptive. You don't want to how can I say? You don't want to be global or evaluative. Once you target the behavior, you then have to be specific about which behavior is the problem. You don't want to focus on too many behaviors or problems at one time. You want to pick a couple of examples that illustrate the problem or behavior and identify them specifically as you can. Instead of saying you never listen to me, or you can say on the other day in the meeting you interrupted me 3 times and made it hard for me to get my point across. So you want to back up what you're saying with specific examples that helps the person to see what the problem is. And you want to do it in a way that doesn't put them in a corner or doesn't make them defensive or argumentative, but you want to focus on what exactly the issue, the problem is. You don't want to focus on your feelings. I'm mad at you, I don't like you. That's all symptoms of what the problem is. You want to get right down to think, what is the problem here between me and this person? And then you want to make the communication. And not only do you want to make the communication, you want to own the communication, in a way that, you're the one being responsible for it. You're the one that's saying it. You're not, trying to hide behind somebody else. And you want to be congruent. Make sure your message is consistent with your body language and your words. So if you say you're open, don't have your arms crossed, and you really want to feel what you're saying honestly, and you want to be honest in your communication and open, and you want to show them through example that that you're earnestly trying to gain their trust and work through this problem in a mature and logical way. And that's the only way you're going to build these collaborative work environments, is that, when you open up and you're honest with yourself and your feelings, and you don't try to inflict your frustrations or problems onto other people unfairly, when you really take ownership for your mistakes and you communicate in a way that's transparent, and you don't try to reposition your feelings in one situation to another. You're really who you are in the moment, and you're able to communicate in the clearest of terms without any other irrelevant or disruptive information interfering with that communication. That's what it's all about. And a lot of people get too wrapped up in their own personal problems and issues, and they may have a problem with their kids or their mommy or daddy and their spouse, and they're bringing those issues to work, and it's affecting the way they communicate. So they're really mad at their wife or husband, and they're at work, and they seem mad at you, but it has nothing to do with you. And that's when times you just need to break. Sometimes I feel this, I come up with this problem all the time, and I just stop and say, you know what are you really mad at? When you see someone's inflicting this anger and this madness at you, and it has nothing to do with you, you just stop and say, what are you really mad at? Don't take this out on me. Let's get to the problem here. Is there something I can help you with? It just takes, some people are very good at this, some people need a lot more work at this. So my little homework assignment for you is to analyze your communication events and situations that you get into with your family and your coworkers over the next week, and really take a stop before you communicate back with anybody. Stop and say, what would be the most effective way for me to communicate with this person? Maybe an email might be really convenient right now, but maybe that's not the best way. Maybe I should make a phone call or see this person in person. Or, whenever you feel yourself getting mad or defensive or upset, take a step back to see what's really going on here. What am I really mad at? What is the real issue or problem? And focus on the problem this week, and focus on, doing things that make your communication more effective. And for everybody out there that is a bad listener, take a second to listen to me now, and I want you to focus on whoever is important in your life when they talk to you, to really put everything down, the iPhone, the computer, your magazine, and look them in the eyes when they're talking to you, and really, maybe for the first time in months, actually give them the respect they deserve, and show them that you're actively listening to what they're saying, and take a second after they're done talking to you and ask them questions back. Is this what you mean? Is this what you're trying to say? And show them the respect that these people deserve. And let's not get too caught up and too bound up with technology that we can hide behind, and really become, focus on what you can do to become a more effective communicator this week. Okay, that's it for this chapter's presentation. I look forward to talking to you next time. Take care.